It's like every single bad guy, if they were out of office, they could count on a safety net being there through USAID or one of these other programs. I mean, all around the world. I just forgot his name now. The former Australian Prime Minister who is now, I think, the ambassador from Canberra to Washington. I've just read Rudd or something. Hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Like Politico, a left tilting news organization, $8 million worth of subscriptions. That's insane. I think the New York Times itself was it $40 million worth of subscriptions from, I think it was AID or that maybe another government department. How do you even, like, there's not enough people, like, did they buy literally every bureaucrat a subscription just to launder money to their friends? Like, it's so gross and it's so ubiquitous. It's as bad as anyone ever claimed it would be. Again, Alex Jones level conspiracy theories are not enough to take in what actually happened. This is another one of those Alex Jones was right moments.
Yep, and another example, just in the past few days, we published a new report at the foundationforfreedomonline.com on the use of US money in Europe funding European NGOs and journalists. And, we found over $9 million in subscriptions to just one media company in Europe, France's AFP, one of the largest news agencies in the world. $9 million in subscriptions, together with funding for 21 other organizations in Europe, all of which are either enforcers or signatories to the EU's Code of Practice on Disinformation, which has become the Digital Services Act, which is being used to go after Elon Musk's X, being used to go after American tech platforms that are deemed by European bureaucrats to be insufficiently committed to censoring hate speech or disinformation. That is supported with US government money spread across all of these NGOs and news organizations in Europe. So it's a perfect example of what I was just talking about, which is, the soft power apparatus, which was built for the Cold War, now being turned around to censor Americans and undermine American tech platforms.
There's something else that's going on that's just incredible. And I think we all noticed it the very first day, January 20th, which is Trump's pace is unprecedented. People used to talk about the first 100 days of administration. I think the first 100 hours of this administration is even too long a period of time, because the number of executive orders and changes, like they started deporting illegals the same day. They made moves the same day as he was inaugurated. And even just yesterday, so Donald Trump goes to the Super Bowl, but even in his journey, he's signing executive orders. Sometimes they're trivial, like getting rid of the penny, which he announced yesterday. The penny cost 2 cents to make. He put out a tweet saying so. Bringing back plastic straws, stopping the rules for those awful paper straws. Some of it is trivial. Some of it is taunting or amusing, like renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. But is it really funny? Because how many things does the left rename? How many historical traditions do they tear down and rename? In Canada, some of our great founding fathers, so to speak, have had streets and subway stations named after them, renamed some woke name. Why can't Trump rename things? But what I'm getting at is the speed, the momentum. He's keeping his enemies on the back foot. He's moving so fast. They're still reacting to what he did a week ago, but he's done 6 more things since then. It's a kind of blitzkrieg, pardon the analogy, of executive actions. I don't even think there's been any votes in Congress on any substantive bills or anything. It's just Trump moving with every lever of power that he has, and it's awesome. What do you make of the pace of it?
And on 2 counts, I think Democrats and the establishment that oppose Donald Trump have themselves to blame on this, because they spent so many years, decades even, building up executive power. And, now that executive power is being being used in ways they don't like, finally, in ways that it certainly wasn't used during the first Trump administration.
Right.
And that's another way in which the establishment and, its allies in the blob and its soft power apparatus, and its allies in the media sort of undermined themselves because they used all of their energy, used so many dirty tricks during the first Trump administration, so much censorship to make sure he lost in 2020. They co-opted Silicon Valley platforms. They destroyed free speech on those platforms, which was part of the founding DNA of those companies. They expended all that effort, and the only effect they had was to give Trump 4 years to prepare for his new term. I think if he won in 2020, he wouldn't have had all that time to prepare. He wouldn't have had time to put everything in place. I think it was sort of a silver lining for Trump that he was out of office for 4 years and could prepare, this frenzy of activity that we're now seeing play out.
I see a couple of judges, local, I think they're called district judges. I'm not familiar with the court system in the U.S. to understand the difference, but I understand that sometimes a district judge will, in one locality, say, I'm now going to make a ruling that applies to the entire United States of America, and those often get slapped down. But in one case, a judge said you can't simply en masse stop all these payments. And I think he was referring to the USAID, if I'm remembering the case correctly. And they're coming up with judges who are often partisan. Every judge is appointed by some president, but these are some particularly activist judges. I suppose that's the Empire Strikes Back, isn't it? I mean, I suppose everyone knew Trump was going to take some steps, and they were going to lean on the Democrat strength of activist judges and activist lawyers. I don't know if that's going to work. I mean, I suppose some of it is how quickly Trump can get a superior court to knock those down. And I suppose in some ways Trump might literally just not listen. I mean, Joe Biden didn't listen when the court said his student loan forgiveness was unlawful. I mean, what are you going to do, arrest him? I think that the courts, by overreaching, by prosecuting the lawfare against Trump for the last 4 years, have sort of burnt up their moral authority, is what I'm saying. I think conservatives are generally very law-abiding and respectful of legal authority, but when you spend 4 years bending the laws to get Trump, there's not a lot of respect left in at least the Republican side of the populace to say, hey, Trump, you better slow down. This judge might have a point. I think those activist judges torched the reputation of all judges in a bit. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think when you had, like you said, 4 years of lawfare, what is it, 400 indictments against Trump already, a completely weaponized judicial system, really, combined with Soros-funded DAs letting violent criminals out onto the streets. I think a lot of Americans know that just because someone's a judge or a DA doesn't necessarily mean they're not a partisan political operative, and I think many of these judges who are now coming out with rulings against Trump fall into that category. I think a lot of this will end up at the Supreme Court. A lot of it will end up at higher courts, and we'll see what happens there. But certainly, with the Democrats, not in control of the House, not in control of the Senate, not in control of the White House, and not in control of the bureaucracy. They were arguably the establishment was still in control of the democracy of the bureaucracy, arguably during the first Trump term. That's clearly not happening this time around. So their only option really is to, number one, fall back on the courts, on the judicial system, and number two, I think, fall back on their foreign allies. There's a lot of hopes, particularly in the censorship industry. The vast network of disinformation researchers and private companies like NewsGuard that support online censorship, that the European Union, with its Digital Services Act, can somehow bring Silicon Valley to heel. But the Trump administration has a weapon against that too, in the form of tariffs. You could argue that the DSA, with its massive fines on American tech companies, is a tariff in all but name on the tech sector. And Trump and the American government is perfectly within their rights to respond to that with their own trade measures.
I remember when Mark Zuckerberg had his conversion on the road to Damascus, when he renounced, and we talked about this before, he even used the language of the right in jettisoning transgenderism and things of that sort. To me, by far the most important thing in Zuckerberg's comments were when he alluded to the fact that the State Department would help Facebook liberalize its approach to free speech in foreign countries. And to me, and I think we agreed on this, that's code for the State Department would push back on any government that said to Zuckerberg, no, 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 you've got to keep doing our bidding, whether it's in Brazil or in the UK. And just this morning, it looks like Rumble, the free speech platform, is back in Brazil. So something must have moved there, which is surprising.
I think something did. I think that something was the USAID going away. It's important to remember here that it's not so much the current State Department and the current US government pressuring these foreign countries. It's more a case of them undoing the damage that they had already done over the past half decade or more, because as we show in our latest report in Europe, and also frankly in Brazil, there was millions and millions of US government money flowing into these places, into Brazil, into Europe, into NGOs that were across these countries, across the continent of Europe, whose sole purpose was to create a panic around disinformation and to encourage regulators in those countries to go after American tech companies. So really, if Trump pushes back on that with what Mike Benz calls free speech diplomacy, if they push back on that with tariffs or with a new direction from the State Department, that's really undoing the damage that the foreign policy blob had done in promoting online censorship around the world.